Welcome to this session on entrepreneurship, introduction and fundamentals. The purpose of this learning is for us to start exploring what is involved with becoming an entrepreneur and to ask ourselves some important truths that can help us make optimal decisions when starting our business. What do we mean by entrepreneur? According to the Oxford English Dictionary, an entrepreneur is a person who sets up a business or businesses taking on financial risks. So an entrepreneur sets up a business, owns a business, and takes on financial risks, which might sound rather intimidating, but that loose definition can cover a whole range of scenarios and spectrum of people. But it's important to know that these are largely a choice, and even more important to be aware that some of these choices are made at the very start, when you may not even realize it. Which is why this session is about raising awareness of some of the decisions you may start making, without even realizing some of the potential options available. Now, we could look at the potential options available to you. But let's start with you, before looking at choices for becoming the type of entrepreneur that you want to be. Although we have to bear in mind that, like any career or life change, we will change, so these might be questions that you want to revisit in the future. First off, let's think about rewards, because that is often one of the first things people will think about when looking to start a venture and is often a motivation. Rewards can be financial, but they may also be emotional, to feel a sense of pride and achievement, to feel more relevant or respected, or they may be to do some societal good, or to grow your own skills and knowledge with a view to some future benefit, to improve your current lifestyle, or another reason that motivates you. Make a note, mental or physical, of what you are looking to get from starting a business. It might be more than one of these things, and if so, try to rank them relative to each other. Now let's think about lifestyle. Some people love to work crazy long hours and enjoy putting all of their time and effort into their venture. But many see this as a drawback of life as an entrepreneur. How hard you work is clearly a choice, but decisions you take when starting your business, and as you scale it, will help determine to some degree how much you need to sacrifice individually to keep your business in business. And of course, this will often be traded off against your potential rewards. At this stage, it is a good idea to think about red lines that might constrain the options you are willing to consider. How many hours are you willing to commit? Over what time frame? With what level of compensation? And what are the other things in life you need to protect? Start a list of your lifestyle red lines. Another key consideration is the level of security you need your venture to offer you. This will help inform your risk appetite. How reliant are you on the success of your business? Can you afford for it to fail? We often hear tropes about needing to be all in and having everything on the line if we really believe in our business and want it to succeed. But best chances of success come when you are maintaining acceptable levels of risk, where potential failure can be managed, and your level of investment is commensurate with your level of risk. A person who is effectively over-leveraged in their own business is unlikely to make solid strategic decisions or maintain a high level of performance. Make a note of what you are willing and are not willing to lose when investing in your business. How long would you be willing or able to go without pay? Or how many months of runway do you need before your own financial security will become a distraction? You may also want to consider the level of control you want to maintain in your business over what time frame. This can vary from those who are quite willing to relinquish or take on limited control from the outset, to those who wish to individually maintain majority control for the life or their life in the business. In an ideal world, your level of involvement in your business and level of decision-making in your business will be your choice. But once you no longer have majority control, it is not. Think about if and when that circumstance will be acceptable to you. For highly successful businesses that grow into much larger companies, it is rare that the person or people at the top are the same as those who were there on day zero. Remember that from the outset, you may not be on your own, and your team will be key to your success. It is also often near the top of an investor's list when judging a business. For now, we will focus on the founding team. Statistically, solo founders tend to lead businesses that spend more time in the startup phase than co-founder teams, but tend to have lower failure rates. Let's consider some of the benefits of solo founders compared with co-founders. Solo founders can make decisions more quickly, reducing overhead and increasing responsiveness. They can maintain a strong vision without needing to dilute it to compromise between multiple viewpoints. They have greater financial control over the business and no requirement to consider the financial needs of co-founders. There is clear accountability. The founder is responsible for business decisions. There is no ambiguity. Solo founders don't fall out with their co-founders, which can be one of the primary reasons for the failure of businesses with multiple founders. Co-founders can bring a greater number of skills to the table. They can share the stresses of a growing business. Co-founder teams have a greater pool of ideas and viewpoints to draw from, and can access wider networks. They can share the high workloads of an early-stage business and reduce the risk of burnout. Teams of co-founders provide greater resilience for the business, resulting from challenges faced by founders in their personal lives. And we often find that co-founder teams are more attractive to investors than businesses led by a single founder. Investors may consider a team to be lower risk due to perception of solo founders being a single point of failure for the business. If you are still deciding on your founding team, you should consider what gaps in critical skills or assets that this business absolutely needs to succeed is each person bringing? How well aligned are our goals with this venture? Am I comfortable with what each person will give to and take from the venture and their expectations of what I will give and take? Will our personalities be compatible, particularly during stressful periods? Do you trust them? If you already know who your founding team is, make sure you clearly define roles and responsibilities and accountability. Agree compensation, including equity and salary. Formalize the arrangement through a shareholder agreement. So, what are the decisions we need to be making, or may have already made, in the first days, weeks, and months of starting our business? Let's take a quick look at the type of company we want to create, how we plan to finance that company, what the company will do, and how it will operate. At this stage, we are just introducing these facets of our business, with opportunities to delve into them in more detail in future sessions. Most people will create a private limited company. This is a privately owned company, which simply means its shares are not traded on public stock exchanges, but are held by private individuals or companies. The limited part refers to the liability being limited to the company and not extending to the shareholders. So the shareholders' own personal finances and assets are protected from any company debts or legal claims. However, this doesn't absolve the shareholder from all legal responsibility, and they can still be individually pursued for criminal acts in relation to the business, such as fraud, and executive directors owe a duty of care to the business and can be held personally liable for negligence. You are unlikely to start a business as a public limited company, which have minimum capital requirements and greater regulation through the Financial Conduct Authority, FCA, in the UK. There is much greater responsibility on the board of a PLC, and this is usually a step that will be taken when a company has reached the stage where it is looking to raise substantial funds from the public and provide an opportunity for existing shareholders to turn their equity into cash. Therefore, you will often hear of initial public offering, or IPO, which is the step when a company moves from being privately held to publicly traded, as an exit for founders and early-stage investors. You may consider establishing your business as a not-for-profit, in which case there aren't any shareholders. Funds are typically raised from donations. The company must have a charitable purpose and will be regulated by the Charity Commission and must ensure strict governance and reporting by its nominated board. There can be significant work involved with establishing and maintaining a charity legally, but the charity benefits from tax exemptions, putting all proceeds towards its cause. Community interest companies, CIC, are social enterprises. They are limited companies with shareholders that can receive dividends, but the majority of profits are reinvested or used for social purposes. In terms of regulation and reporting, they sit between a limited company and a charity. A partnership is a business that is owned by two or more people. In a general partnership, the business is not a separate legal entity to its owners, and there is no limit of liability. In a limited liability partnership, the business is a separate legal entity where all partners have limited liability. Partnerships have less regulation and reporting requirements and less influence from the outside world. The partners are the source of financing and running of the business. Therefore, partnerships are less suited to scale. There are several other legal business types, including sole traders. However, most likely when starting a business, you will be considering a private limited company, and if looking for a windfall, going public through a future IPO. You may found a community interest company or perhaps a not-for-profit if a primary goal of your business is to invest in a public good. Private limited companies and CICs are most common if you are looking to raise investment. University spin-outs usually start as a private limited company, where the university provides the business with access to the IP generated through university research in exchange for a shareholding in the spin-out business.
How we finance a business is instrumental to the journey the business and the founder or founders will go on. You will inevitably need money early on in order to grow your business. But it's important to have a general idea and strategy for the financing of your business through to commercialization. By this, we mean up to the point that the business is able to generate sufficient cash from products and services to support its own growth, at least in part. The challenge for deep tech type businesses in particular is the time to commercialization, and therefore the time during which you are reliant on other sources of finance. We will cover the finance journey in more detail in other sessions, but for now we'll just introduce some forms of finance that you may be considering that will likely set the business on a certain course that in some cases cannot then be undone. In an early stage business, equity, the value of shares issued by a company, is often one of the few financial tools you have available to you. This can be used from pretty much day one to raise funds and attract and reward staff. Selling equity to investors is one of the most effective ways to raise capital in a pre-revenue business. Early on, this is likely to be individual investors, known as angels, and then venture capitalists. However, you must be aware that whilst investors will bring cash to the table, they will also want to take a seat at the table and have a say in decisions made by the business. This may bring great direction and expertise to the business, but choose your investors wisely. Taking private investment will usually necessitate future funding rounds, during each of which the founders will be subsequently further diluted. Therefore, it is important to recognize that equity as a form of finance dilutes control and dilutes your share of the reward at exit, which may or may not be your decision. Grants are a non-dilutive form of funding from the government. The advantage of grants is that you maintain your equity. The challenge of grants is that they may be slow to access, are often paid retrospectively, often require a contribution from the business, and are not designed with your specific objective in mind. Therefore, grants alone are rarely sufficient sources of finance, but can be an effective tool for maintaining greater levels of equity, supplementing funding, and increasing investor confidence and business credibility. In the early stages of a business, debt finance is usually only offered in the form of secured loans, i.e., you are personally liable for the debt. This can bring significant personal risk and therefore needs to be considered against your personal circumstances when it comes to financial security. Loans tend to become a primary finance tool when the business has reached commercialization and has revenue streams to borrow against, allowing it to obtain unsecured loans to support the business through growth. Secured loans can be used effectively in combination with grants on a short-term basis, but note that the grant will not cover the interest. Or there are sometimes unsecured loan options available to early-stage businesses where the liability has been underwritten by the government. Bootstrapping is a term used to refer to a business that does not rely on external funding sources, but instead utilizes funds directly from the founders or through early revenue-generating activities of the business. This approach allows the founders to retain the equity in the business and full control. For deep tech companies, where development time and costs can be prohibitively high, the business may rely on other earlier forms of revenue-generating business, such as consulting. However, this can mean that bootstrapping your business diverts focus and energy from core product development and limits the available cash to grow the business during its early stages. Unlike a business that has sold shares, a bootstrapped business has the option to transition to a private investor-backed business, but risks falling behind the market during this time.
Intrinsically linked to the type of business and its financing is, of course, what will the business do? How will it operate? And this is something that may well evolve over time. It's good practice to have a broad idea of this at the outset, your strategy, but to remain agile and adaptable. In broad terms, your business will be providing a product, a service, or a combination of both. Services generally have earlier routes to commercialization than products. This is one of the reasons businesses may often look at an initial service offering, such as contract research and consulting, which can allow them to generate revenues, build relationships within their product market, and gain credibility in the sector. In parallel, developing their product towards market. Businesses with an established product may then shift back towards a more service-oriented business, potentially using their product as a moat. This is often considered in terms of moving up the value chain. Product businesses may also work their way up the supply chain, starting as lower-tier suppliers, for example supplying parts for a product and eventually the product itself. As you move up the value and supply chains, contract sizes increase and generally business complexity increases. Businesses may opt to stay within a specific part of the chain, seeking to strengthen an existing position and expand its market. You may opt to restrict your business's activities to the development of IP, generating and licensing patented technology for your customers to manufacture and sell. Reinvesting your revenues into generating new IP in new areas, and so forth. Or you may focus on developing parts that you sell to an equipment manufacturer, potentially being several steps removed from the consumer. At the other end of the spectrum, your business may not have any development or manufacture capability and be focused on providing solutions to customers through established supply chains. And everything in between.